Good afternoon to everyone. Uh, the topic of the afternoon speech would be traditional and modern subjects and teaching methodology. And Samdurumji will be speaking on this topic. In this session, the topic is traditional and modern subject and teaching methodology. And this morning we discussed about the traditional and modern education system. And actually, there's no differences in those two different topics, but still, uh, because of the insufficient time, I um, haven't been able to talk in detail this morning. As I said earlier, traditional and modern education subject and teaching methodology, and to know well about the traditional um, and modern subject and teaching methodology, and one must have a good knowledge of what is actually traditional education and the modern education. And this morning I talked about the modernity and how it evolves in our history and how it affects our day-to-day life um, lifestyles and what impacts it placed on our life and our society. Tradition, tradition shouldn't be understood as something one have uh, one has been familiarized with, or something that people have been doing for a long time. And many of things that we have done for very long time in earlier period of time, not necessarily has to be the tradition that we are speaking here. And the Tibetan word Sogyun is something that we uh, uh, use quite lately. And 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 the tradition that we are talking about is the one that these days people all over the world discuss about when they discuss about the difference between the tradition and modernity. In tantric tradition, and and the Sanskrit word tantra has two connotations, as like in the Tibetan word sogyun. Basic Tibetan education policy. I hope everyone have read it. There's a definition for the word sogyun, which is roughly translated into English as tradition. Um, I, tradition, uh, the word tradition has its own qualities to make certain connotations. So it doesn't have to necessarily mean something that we have been familiarized with so many years or times. It has three qualities indeed. And the Sogyun, the first quality of the word Sogyun is it needs a divine origin. And non-Buddhists describe this as a source, a divine source, as something that come from a god or godly things. In Buddhist and in Buddhist text, um, we talk about the four lines, and when we talk about uh, thoroughly hidden phenomena, um, we we are we are advised or instructed in the text to rely upon someone who has actually gained this knowledge. And the lineage of the person whom we are relying upon, there shouldn't be any break in the lineages. And during Buddha's time, uh, there are very few Buddha's teachings that are inscripted on transcripted on books, and whatever the teachings that were available, there was a transmission from one to another through um, air to air. And after having transcribed all the Buddha's teaching, and there's also this lineage of oral transmissions uh, and also the Tripitaka, the three baskets of sutra. It has its own lineage, unbroken lineage from Buddha to today's period, and even um, even though if it has a very long unbroken lineage, if it doesn't have logical backup, or it is something that is capable of being verified by common sense. The one who actually uh, introduced these three qualities of the tradition, it's one of the scholars from Sri Lanka. He was the practitioner or follower of the Theravada tradition, and he was first um, a scientist who researched on antiques, and there are also around 20 books written by this Sri Lankan scholar. Uh, these days, he is said to be the one, highly respected by anyone who support the idea of traditional education and system, and many who endorse this idea actually rely upon him and cite quotations from his books and so on. And as we Tibetan normals, they don't have this habit of taking bath, so we cannot simply say this is also one part of a tradition. So to actually to uh, and tradition is should be something uh, that has the quality to benefit the people, and in Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, there are actually lots of good traditional way of things, and also, but there are, and also we could find some uh, um, also even though we Tibetan monastic community, there are a lot of good tradition, but we can also find some unnecessary way of living mixed up with our tradition, such as dancing, monastic dance, and without having any meditative realization and power, merely wearing a mask and showing a dance to audience. It is nothing. Um, it is very much similar to the people who make movies and show them into cinema hall, even though they don't play drums and guitar, and 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 if we are to review this practice or um, this sort of dance, unless we do not have people who have such good knowledge and power about meditations and who doesn't, people who do not have such meditative realization, there is no point for us uh, to work for the sustenance of such tradition that doesn't have any quality to benefit our community. There is a big difference we could find in the people who, when they identify the nature of education, and education is widely recognized as something that help people improve their intelligence and their knowledge. The word that we normally use in English as education, what Mahatma Gandhi said is it's just a literacy, and Mahatma Gandhi clearly pointed out that it is not it is not actual education. It is just literacy shouldn't cannot be education. It is just a step to learn, or a method to gain education. It's not actually itself education. And the definition of education is actually summed up very well in Tibetan education policy, basic Tibetan education policy. Education, it's written in the basic education policy of Tibetan in exile. It is stated, education is to be recognized as a human quality that enables understandings of external objects and phenomena, and that leads to the awakening, maturing, and completion of potential of the inner consciousness. One that awaken and mature and complete the potential of the inner consciousness should be called education. And also, education is not to be recognized as merely grasping what is heard from others. Instead, it is to be recognized as realization of what is heard through the power of self confirmation, and actualization of what is realized through persistent contemplation. It is thus a process of learning through hearing from others, self investigation, and persistent contemplation. And I'm just citing that from that Tibetan education policy. Education is to be recognized as a key inner technology that it transforms social and personal action into wholesome deeds. And education is not to be recognized merely as a means of livelihood. Instead, it is to be recognized as means of achieving temporary as well as long-term welfare for the self and others. In particular, it is to be recognized as vehicle of social welfare and service. And when we say education, it doesn't mean whatever we learn. Uh, when someone study technology and science, and how the scientists conduct research on certain um, field of research, after understanding these kinds of knowledge, what happens to the one who knows this? It doesn't have any impact, or it doesn't make any changes to the one who actually knows what scientist has created and innovated for so far. And we call it uh, primary step to education. It is it has nothing to do with oneself and one's own practice of inequalities and so on. And once the people who know about science and technology, and he um, strive to seek the reason behind why uh, it is said like this, and why what is the result of all the scientific inspection. It is something that has the relationship with one who actually knows about the science and technology. And the topic that we touched this morning has nothing different with the topic that we are dealing now. Tradition and modernity subject to, to set a curriculum on these two field of knowledge, traditional and modern education. There's obviously differences in terms of setting curriculum. When we divide these two different uh, education system or education field, it's talking about traditional education in India, Buddhist and non-Buddhist, um, proponent of non-Buddhist and Buddhist tenets. There's always differences in terms of um, counting different subjects of the um, school of thoughts, and even in Hindu tradition, you could find lots of different types of subject, and you could find a different division within the um, context of Hindu tradition, traditional teachings. Vedic and Upanishads, these kind of things you could find in the Hindu traditional teachings. And also there is a system of counting um, the different subjects of different field of knowledge as being 18 different um, subjects. And also there is um, the scriptures of Brahma and the word of Vedics, Brahmic Vedics. These kinds of things you could find in Hindu tradition. And the Buddhists are the only one who uh, count as five different fields of knowledge: and language and logic of reasonings, and art and crafts, and medicine, and it is believed that every uh, different kinds of education is condensed or included in these five fields of knowledge. The reason why the Buddhists uh, include all the subject into these five different fields of knowledge is um, and the reason behind why Buddhists actually uh, s- uh, introduce these five different field of religious field of knowledge is to defeat the view of other traditions. This is actually clearly stated by Arya Maitreya in one of his books, and also to um, uh, to 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 lead its own followers and so on. As I uh, mentioned earlier, uh, Sogen has to be Sogen should have a original source, and these five knowledge field of knowledge has their own source, authentic source, and a source from someone who is enlightened, or someone who is equal to the enlightened one in terms of gaining knowledge and so on. Unless we know that this field of knowledge is based on their instruction, we wouldn't be able to uh, actually know that these field of knowledge are valid, unless it doesn't have this field of knowledge doesn't have do not have in authentic source. As stated in a Buddhist text, whatever the enlightened being has said or guided, it is based on his own knowledge. It's not something that he doesn't have knowledge of, but whatever the Buddha or enlightened being teaches his own disciple, he teaches them based on his understanding and knowledge. In terms of medical medicine, in terms of Tibetan medical uh, field of knowledge, it is said to be. It is said there are four different lineages. Although it is not actually uh, uh, s- uh, actually the Tibetan medical uh, education is not something brought up from India, but it was it started to uh, come into existence as in a visualization of certain high lamas. For Giluk followers like us, uh, when we count the lineage of our teachings and gurus, uh, we count Manjushri and Lama Umaba and Tsongkhapa as our root lamas or lineages. In terms of astrology, uh, the Kala Chakra lineage and also Vinayana tradition. There are also some astrological astrological education, which has its roots um, um, ancient Chinese uh, epistemologies and so on. In terms of art and craft, although it's quite pervasive and wide, and it has the field of knowledge pertaining to the art and craft, it has its own roots or source in the sutras. That's what we believe. And and there could be some other field of knowledge which has relation in with these five main field of knowledge. The modern education, if one includes Buddhism into modern education, then it's a different case. Economics, political science, and social science, all of these are something that was found through um, inspection or investigation of normal human beings, and it's not something found out by some enlightened being who has unmistaken power, unmistaken and discriminative wisdom. uh, Relying upon machine or technology, we can uh, now and by using this technology, we can nowadays see things that are very far in distance, and there's always going to be distance in these kinds of machines and technologies, and our knowledge based on a modern science and technology, there's always going to be limitation, and also stated in our text that when someone gain realizations or clairvoyance, still they face difficulties in terms of realizing or perceiving certain objects that are very much far away from, or which are beyond their capabilities or capacity to actually understand or realize. In Vinaya, filter. In Vinaya, Buddha has instructed his follower without uh, using filter, monks or the ordinary people shouldn't drink water. If the one if one does not have a filter, and one has to uh, wait for a couple of times until water stays still to avoid the killing of microorganism that could be found in water. there is no instructions of Buddha that cannot be actualized or practiced by his followers. And and there are a lot of things that we should be proud of when we talk about the nuclear particles and so on that for many times touched in our text of Abhidharma and so on. And in a book which was written around 19th century and between 19th century and 20th century, uh, and the book dealt with the particles in nuclear and uh, normally I say it shouldn't be called as a field of knowledge. We can call it wisdom. The one we normally recognize as a field of knowledge is and I normally say that the one that we nowadays recognize, uh, we normally count science as a field of knowledge, but I usually say we shouldn't use this term when we uh, talk about science. Science is not actually a field of knowledge. We can call it a wisdom because there is always going to be uncertainty in whatever that is described in a scientific uh, science. As time passes and the change occurs in our and there's always going to be faults and people always are going to change their way of thinking and doing when they deal with the scientific education and product. Apart from this, there's also one differences one can find between traditional and this modern education. Uh, every and all the traditional education, all the traditional education is shows or guide us to um, uh, help people to attain liberation or enlightenment directly or indirectly. Um, and when it comes to modern education, it's all about earning a good livelihood and to earn certain material um, and social science and psychologists and political science. These these are something that people continuously observe and investigate it for time to time, for quite long time, and it can also remain for quite a long time to be a reality. But when also when something some changes, great changes occurs in history, it could also uh, change in any time. As the word Soygun in Tibetan has a connotations of uh, continuation, and everything everything that are taught in traditional education, uh, there is always going to remain still, and there is people doesn't have to change in any point of time, because when it comes to modern education, there's always going to be changes, and what people uh, used to uh, consider reality can always there'll be a time um, that people change their conceptions. And in today's world, uh, and the modern educational institute, Buddhist um, teachings are also included in their curriculum. And 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 it is the Buddhism is taught in modern institute based on the necessary, just to understand or know what is said in the text, and uh, and it doesn't and it is always taught or introduced in modern institute as academics only, not as something that the one who learns the Buddhism should one day actualize or practice whatever they have learned in this academics or institute. And Buddhist thoughts, when they are taught in modern universities and college, it is always introduced in the form of academic knowledge or subject. I remember uh, that when there is vacancies for people who are eligible to teach in Western colleges, people who can teach actually Buddhism to the students there. When there is vacancy for such people, and when uh, the colleges or institute send someone to find out people eligible to uh, hold this position, and the one we actually recommended to the institute, he didn't get this position. And when we asked why he didn't get this position or job, and the reason is that he is very much religious, and that is why he is one-sided in that case, and he cannot actually investigate or teach the student based on unbiased position. And there is a notion that one who has a deep faith in Buddhism will never be able to actually investigate Buddha's words and teachings. One professor recently asked me, and he is, although not a Buddhist, he has studied Buddhism for quite long. We, as Buddhists, put a lot of emphasis on logics, whatever the findings or the things that we know, uh, as Buddhist followers, base everything's on every knowledge based on their logical reasonings and so on. And he asked the question that since Buddha has already um, made everything clear or confirmed the the pre-fact, pre-confirmed fact, there is nothing new that we can investigate and find out. And if we were to tell this, I find this in the reality, no one actually accept it, right? And no one would uh, if one investigate and find out that there is no existence of there isn't any possibility or existence of uh, rebirth, no one would accept or agree with this claim. If someone uh, and I've clearly told him, if you introduce me with someone who has solid evidence and logical reasonings or backup to prove that there is no rebirth or reincarnation, I will definitely drop my belief of reincarnation and existence of rebirth. The reason that why I am saying this is uh, uh, in terms of the differences between modern and traditional education, and there you can find difference in terms of the nature of those two different fields of knowledge itself themselves. And when it comes to imparting knowledge of these two different field of knowledge, there's always going to be differences. In modern education system, if the sutra of 8,000 verses, 8,000 stanzas is included in modern education curriculum, if we ask if it is if we if we ask whether it is modern education or ancient traditional education, as they actually include them as if it is modern education. and and the reason they include or put this 8,000 stanza sutra into their curriculum of modern education, it is only because of their curiosity and just to find out uh, what are there to be understood, which has logical backup and reasoning. It is merely to find out what Buddha has said and why he said so, and and why those who wrote commentary on this sutra and these kind of things. That's just to find out these kind of things. Although the text itself is a traditional uh, education, the way, but when it is included in modern education curriculum and it is introduced in a way of how the modern educations are taught, and it uh, even though the text itself becomes a traditional educational subject, it cannot be traditional one, as it is being taught in a way that is far more um, different than it is taught in a traditional way of teaching. Afflicted person and its way of thinking and way of uh, assuming how these kind of things happen, and how because of these afflictions uh, the poisonous defilement increases. Even though we include these kinds of education in a modern education system, it will not be beneficial. And also through uh, the and also in terms of traditional system of imparting knowledge, if uh, if we include modern education such as social science and economics, it would be quite beneficial and helpful to those who are actually studying to understand how they are not sustainable, and how they are fragile. If we know how to include many of the modern education into our traditional five different field of knowledge, we can count many of the modern education as part of uh, our five different field of knowledges. And also uh, and a modern education such as economics and social science could also be taken or studied in terms of while studying studying traditional education as uh, tools, or as an object to compare, to make comparison between between traditional and modern educations, and to see their um, shortcomings and so on. It is actually quite difficult to draw a final sort of a line between these two different fields of knowledge, actually to differentiate these two different educations. Uh, Many Westerners these days translate and also study tantric um, teachings, and when they study and um, practice these tantric um, discourse, it is something just by curiosity and uh, m- just to create a record that he is the one who actually uh, has reached this kind of these points of level, just to gain such recognition, just to gain recognitions and so on. And how we can actually differentiate or uh, the motivations of the teachers and the mentality of the students. Based on these kind of things, we can make distinctions and differences between those two different fields of knowledge. This is my a general viewpoint. To engage in uh, authentic uh, traditional studies, what is required and what is not, what is to be avoided. This is actually the main question for us. For an example, if as for Sarah J Secondary School, as people who met, uh, who gave talk in this morning, their objectives are to complete the participant of to this morning's discussion or debate. Their objectives are to complete their traditional studies of Tibetan Buddhism, and and this is the background or the idea of why the establishment of this traditional Tibetan school of Seraje Monastery. This is the reason why the monastery established this modern field of knowledge, or this school. And the young students or young monk students are taught modern education and Seraje monastic education with uh, with the hope or objectives to broaden their knowledge on both field of traditional and modern education. The omniscient mind is something that sees everything and realizes everything. This particular omniscient mind is sees everything uh, correctly, and before gaining such omniscient mind, there had been a lot of process of um, different sorts of mental factors. Um, there is no such subject of knowledge which shouldn't be included in traditional teachings and traditional studies. And these days we have different technology, modern technology that harms and that uh, which are destructive. There is no such field of knowledge which is required for for the one to gain enlightenment. When we set a curriculum, the background of our thought should be, there is one saying in Indian Buddhist there's a great saying in Indian history. This is something that Atisha occasionally cite this saying. Um, there are a lot of things that we should learn. There are a lot to learn, yet we have a very short life. Within the short period of life, there are a lot of things that one should learn, and therefore it is almost impossible for one to gain all this knowledge. Therefore, it is vital to select those important um, subjects and prioritize the subjects, since they're, and therefore to uh, identify what are actually um, essential for one to gain in the knowledge in this particular life. It is actually same as the previous saying. When we set a curriculum, first of all, students should be taught how to actually investigate things through logical reasonings, without which one cannot pursue education and gain knowledge. As these days, and the first step should be this uh, investigating things with logical reasonings. This is the reason why the logical reasoning is introduced in most in all the Tibetan Buddhist monastic institute. The logic of reasoning is taught primarily in these monastic institute, because in primary school, after imparting education to the students for 8 years, why we seem to lack our lack students who have interest to continue their study in Buddhist thought, is that we lack right from the beginning uh, the techniques to actually inspire those beginners. The most important thing is how the education is imparted, and the method of imparting education, and the manner how it is imparted. It's very important. And also in terms of setting a curriculum, there's always an importance to select the required subject correctly. So I'm going to end my talk here. We are now going to have question and answer session. Please stand up. Whoever has question, please raise your hands and stand up. Please stand up. Samdar Rinpoche, with respect to Samdar Rinpoche, I have question. First. In when we establish phenomena in Buddhist texts, we uh, establish phenomena based on four different objects of knowledge: uh, obvious or manifest, evident phenomena, and slightly hidden phenomena, or thoroughly obscured or hidden phenomena. If and I feel if a Buddhist um, follower wants to become a good scientist, is it possible for him to become a pure scientist? Is it possible? I think it's quite difficult since we have to become to become a pure scientist. We must uh, um, reject lots of our acceptance in terms of Buddhist teachings. You have any examples why we should um, let go of our acceptance, our commitment based on Buddhist teachings, if in order to become a good or pure scientist? And as you uh, said earlier, that whatever the scientific findings, it is always going to change as time passes. So whatever the reality that we uh, identify today could change in some other day. When it comes to the issue of rebirth and reincarnation, it is mostly based on the faith. For us Buddhists, when we accept the existence of rebirth and existence, that we are always accepting these things based on our faith. So therefore, I feel uh, if one has to become a good scientist or pure scientist, we have to avoid some of the commitment or acceptance that we have in terms of Buddhist uh, understandings. When we establish uh, phenomena in Buddhist texts, and as we we establish the existence of phenomena by those three means of um, investigations. To a Buddhist to become a scientist, it is just a possibility. If one Buddhist has to become a scientist, how he should become a scientist? The scientists actually are um, unbiased in terms of investigating things. But when uh, a Buddhist becomes a scientist, and if the Buddhists um, observe or investigate things using the tools of modern scientific machine or technologies, and I think that times he becomes a scientist because he tried to gain his knowledge through investigation using modern technologies. As I told you earlier, if there is someone who can prove with logical reasoning that there is no existence of reincarnations, and it is actually the principles of the Buddhism. If it's go beyond the reality, we cannot accept. And the one thing that we should know, the rebirth and the law of causality is something not that we accept barely on our blindfold, but it has its own evidence or logical reasonings to prove there is this reincarnation, the existence of law of causalities. If scientists come up with the evidence to prove that there is no no rebirth, that is something that can be understood by our um, inferential cognition. And the and therefore we are not accepting the existence of rebirth and reincarnation based on our blindfold. We also rely upon the reasonings, uh, and when it comes to thoroughly obscured phenomena, it's very few in numbers. And um, ultimately, to gain the objects of thoroughly hidden phenomena, we also have to uh, rely upon our basic reasonings and logics. When we prove the existence of rebirth, most of these logics are based on the preceding experience and familiarities. We we accept the existence of rebirth based on the logical reasoning of there being a preceding experiences and uh, remembrance. And when it comes to thoroughly hidden or thoroughly obscured phenomena, um, give giving alms or when we say one gains prosperity by or through giving um, alms to the poor people or um, disadvantaged people, uh, these are something that we could actually uh, realize, although it is normally counted as a slight, thoroughly hidden phenomena. But when it comes to what kinds of benefits or prosperity and what times do we get the result from what types of material that we give to the beggars or poorer people, this is now the object of thoroughly obscured phenomena. This is something beyond our capability of understanding or realizing. Wh- when His Holiness asked my master, when we fold a paper, a page of our scripture, and His Holiness asked my teacher, what is the cause of this motion? What is actually the reason? And my master answered, it is something beyond our capabilities, beyond our capacity of understandings. And when we say uh, thoroughly hidden phenomena, uh, as you said, we have to um, reject our uh, beliefs when if someone becomes when a Buddhist becomes a scientist, he must uh, reject or reject the Buddhist notion of course, when um, someone becomes a scientist, there's always going to be a difficulty for him to accept the idea of Buddhist uh, ecological issues. And there are also people who uh, said, when His Holiness Dalai Lama said he personally he cannot accept the existence of Mount Meru, and there are people who actually say His Holiness actually destroyed or destructed the idea of the Mount Meru. And 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 what we believe in everything, the existence, that every phenomena exists in its appearance. So in that on that basis, whatever uh, uh, in Abhidhamma text, when it says there is Mount Meru, there could be a possible that there exists actually a Mount Meru described as by the Abhidhamma Sutra for Abhidhamma disciples' imaginations or visualizations, or and also Buddhists are actually the first to uh, uh, find out that moons and suns moves and revolves, and it is always even in Tibetan terms, we call uh, our earth as Gola. Gola, in it has its root in Sanskrit word. The Sanskrit word "gol" means a circle or a lump, sphere, and it represents that our the shape of our earth is a circle or round, and also the distance between the Earth and the Sun and Moon, and the speed of the orbitings. A scientist called David Bohm approximate, even though these days scientists um, claim to have known the distance and the speed of the speed of the lights. One of the scientists actually uh, uh, said that it is something approximation or estimation. We cannot actually uh, um, find out the correct answer. I don't think gaining modern educations and we do not have to lose our belief and faith uh, merely by gaining some modern educations and scientific knowledge. And as for now, when scientists actually find out there is no existence, there isn't the non-existent of law of causality or rebirth, then we should accept it. But for up to now, scientists they they did not find out the existence of the rebirth. They didn't understand the actual notion or idea behind the rebirth and so on. They haven't actually found out, or they were certain about uh, the non-existence of non-existence of rebirth and so on. This is something I can confidently say. And if once you become a scientist, you can come to me and we can have further discussion on this matter. Today, with due respect, I'm honored to have this opportunity. And my question relates to both science and Buddhist thought. And I did research on the actual nature of mind, and what result I've come faced is the findings that I have uh, findings from my inspection and investigation on the nature of mind. I studied on the nature of sense and mind, and I I do not find a common basis to find out the nature of mind, as there are varieties of people with different mentality and predisposition. But I come up with one conclusion. And I found out that the mind actually comes, there is no such initial point of mind, and there's always Science is not something that cannot be found. Uh, uh, the the point that I'm making here is the the mind I feel it is. I'm impressed with the scientific development, and I'm very much interested in science and technology. But and now I realize that science is nothing, um, nothing um, interesting. It is something a repetition of what are said in the Buddhist text and the Buddhist uh, discourse or text of Abhidharma. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you have actually said. What is your main question? Just I I think the potency of the mind is always there right from the beginning, and it's not only. Did you hear what he said? The nature of mind. It is. It's not your fault that you didn't find the nature of mind. Once you find or understand the nature of mind, you now have become a highly realized practitioner. Charvaka, uh, although we do not have Charvaka these days in um, today's world, it is an old school of thought, Indian school of thought, and what the proponents of the Charvaka tradition, they observe or inspect the nature of the mind, and what they found out was the mind was something that comes along with our body as the uh, the painting on the wall when the, the wall um breaks down or are destroyed, at that time the painting on that wall is also going to destroyed. Similarly, mind is something that come along with the body, and they do not believe that it has its uh, cause and when the body uh, and what they believe is the body and mind is very much connected. That once the body the body is destroyed, this mind at that point of time itself is being destroyed, and there will be no continuations of mind this um, after that time. And actually, this follower of this Hindu tradition, uh, they are actually serious um, um, philosopher who uh, investigate on the nature of phenomena, and that they are not aware of the real nature of the mind. In recent times, there had been numbers of discussions between the neuroscientist and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and there are number of people who now believes that mind could be something that could sustain without relying upon our physical brain. As a result of these numerous discussions between scientists and Buddhist scholars, primarily initiated by His Holiness. When uh, we observe or analyze the nature of mind, when you say you didn't find the nature, I think, I don't know exactly, but if I assume, if if the mind or the nature of mind is something we could find out, uh, it must be something very manifest and obvious, as scientists claim, because the scientific knowledge are based on the findings of their um, investigation based on manifest or obvious or apparent objects. And if we were to analyze the basis of the imputation of the word uh, mind, of course, it is true that we would not be able to find uh, the basis where we could actually call mind. What we have this time is we have five sensory perceptions and mental perceptions. Five sensory perceptions are perception that rely upon uh, the organs, the physical organs, such as eyes organ, and there is this group of perception that relies on physical organ, and we have uh, mental consciousness or perception, which does not rely upon directly upon a physical organ, but to rely upon mental factors. And there are different types of these kind of mental factors. Uh, Many of these are actually subtle in nature. If we were to point or to touch the gross or the apparent level, we have two different mental consciousness. First being um, conceptualization, conceptuated mind, and non-conceptuated mind. And that these two different mental state or um, mental perception. What scientists haven't been able to understood is that they know that eye's perception rely upon eye organ, and it sends signals to our brains um, neurons, and and but what they haven't been able to understood is a subtle uh, a clarity of mind of the sensory perceptions. Objects and sensory perceptions, and the organ which it rely upon. And with the combination of these three different factors, there comes eye perception. Object, organ, and mind. When these three works together, there um, arises eyes perception. And the object that appears to the uh, uh, eyes perception and eyes organ, it sends some information to the mental consciousness or mental perception. uh, and the message or the appearances that the sense perception sent to the mental perception is called uh, generali- generality. In Tibetan word, it is called Tunchi. That it's actually appearance, and then the mind perception or the conscious mental consciousness give title to the certain objects after getting signal or message or information from the sensory perceptions such as eyes perceptions and so on. And actually what the mind perceive is something that has already been preceded, but it seemed to the mind as if it is still there in appearance. And how it functions, and the way it functions, and what result comes from these functions, if we were to look deeply into this. When I see or sees object, it's more non-conceptuated mind sees or perceives things, and after perceiving it, it sends signals or message to the non conceptuated mind. Conceptuated mind. I think there is a way to find actually the nature of mind. I'm not sure whether I'm actually getting your point or not. It is possible for anyone to find out the nature of the mind. One Vietnamese monk master, uh, uh, based on the um, teachings of the perfection, he wrote a letters on mind and the faculties of the mental um, state. He wrote a book on these issues based on the teachings of the Perfection Sutra. So, so one can actually um, investigate mind and its clarity and the cognitions, the nature of clarity and cognition. But it would be very difficult for someone to verbally explain this to someone. It is something that one can gain knowledge through experience. Um, f- for mind, there should be a preceding cause to give rise to um, the subsequent mind. I'm not sure whether I've answered your question or not. I'm sorry. It's quite a lot. We are going to continue our this question and answer session after a tea break. It's a tea break now.